Hey, good morning. I'm Playbook co-author Eugene Daniels. It is Thursday, October 24th. We're less than 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away. How we got here, I don't know. We're all limping toward the finish line from Election Day, less than 2 weeks. And the vibes inside the Trump campaign are, not that great today as we're waking up. They're feeling okay about the election, maybe not great about the internal politics. Yesterday on the pod, we talked about a brewing controversy around Howard Lutnick. He's the leader of Trump's transition team and a leading financier. But the Trump world drama doesn't end there. Here to chat with me about what we're seeing and hearing and how it could impact the final vote count is, of course, my girl, co-author Rachael Bade. Hello, Rachael.
Good morning, Eugene.
Good morning. You look fabulous as always.
As always, right?
As always, we never look bad on those Zoom meetings at all. We are close and getting closer, but it seems like knives are out in Trump world just a little bit, right? We're seeing stories with legs about key members of his team and potential officials in a second Trump administration. And there are usually one of two reasons for these kinds of stories, especially this close to the election. Either it's finger pointing because things are going terribly, or things are going so well, so some folks are maneuvering and trying to get their rivals out of the way. How would you categorize what we're seeing this week?
I would definitely say it's the latter, Eugene. People sort of positioning themselves to have the upper hand when it comes to appointments or nominations or whatever. Should Trump
Gigs,
win?
chief of staff.
Absolutely. And that, again, reflects this confidence we're seeing in the Trump campaign right now. I don't doubt that, obviously, if he loses, we're going to see a bunch of finger pointing on the former thing you asked about, which is why he lost. But it's funny because we talked on the podcast yesterday. You had our colleague Jasper on to talk about this reporting
Yeah.
we had regarding Howard Lutnick, the transition chair, and these allegations about him mixing his personal business with his duties as the head of the transition. And this is a perfect example of this. Originally, I heard about this, and the story was just that, about this guy sort of maybe abusing this role he had. But the more I talked to people, and like the more we sort of sat on and sort of digested what was going on throughout the day, it became clear that this wasn't about Howard. This was actually about other people in the Trump orbit who are being frozen out right now, people whose names appeared in some capacity on the Project 2024 document or database, and who are now being sidelined by Howard, who is in charge of personnel for a would-be second Trump administration. And so these
Yeah.
people have put a microscope on him, and they've been looking for a reason.
Looking for problems.
Yes,
Yeah.
looking for problems. And so the fact that we weren't just like, seeing this happen and writing this guy is doing something sketchy, it was Trump people coming to us with this story shows the
Yeah.
knives are out. And, another thing I want to mention, we talked earlier this week about the jockeying for the chief of staff role. And I didn't mention this on the pod, though we mentioned it in Playbook a little bit, but the whole reason, this came up was because somebody was telling me about the reaction to a story in the New York Times that Brooke Rollins, who's the head of America First Policy Institute, that she was going to get this job or might be getting this job because Trump was interested in her. And literally within hours of that story posting, we see this breaking news in both Politico and the Washington Post about the America First Policy Institute being hacked. And that had actually been known for a long time in Trump orbit. But the reason it came out at that moment was because people saw that story about Brooke Rollins and were like, hell no, we don't like her. We're going to make sure that leaks.
Yeah.
And then lastly, we got to talk about what's going on right now with Chris Lassa on the campaign, because there has clearly been someone pushing, we think we know who, negative stories about him that are popping up. We saw just yesterday, there was a story by CNN, K-File, who went back and dug up his Twitter
I will say
accounts.
there's nothing I want to leave this earth with less than a K-File call. Like that is the one thing. If you are a politician, if you are a public person, you don't want a K-File call because nothing good is coming of that. Anytime. Go ahead.
Yeah, he's the bearer of bad news. Just don't answer the phone. But yeah, so this again was something that was already known out there. Like this, we knew, or at least I had heard people talk about how Chris Lassa on January 6th had liked or retweeted a number of posts that were very critical of Trump, including one apparently that suggested maybe the cabinet should consider the 25th Amendment to remove him from office. This has sort of been out there, but yet this was all brought to the fore, likely by somebody pitching it to K-File, right? And there's nothing more Trump hates than to have somebody print off a story, put it in front of him, and then reread all these negative things that people close to him have said. So again, this is somebody who clearly is looking at Lassa as a threat and looking to take him down a few notches if they win.
One of the things that's really fascinating is you never know what Trump knows. Like, what if he knew this about Lassa or not? This could be the first time. This could have happened, and someone could have told him during the vetting process when they were working on putting him at the top of the campaign. But the more people and some of the more messier people that they put in this campaign, this has happened more, right? And Lassa has for a while been seen, and Susie Wiles, as kind of shepherding a better Trump campaign than we've seen before, right? And sometimes kind of holding him back, which would be a good thing to have if Trump were to win for a chief of staff, right? Or for some kind of senior advisor role. The headlines are not just are not what the Trump campaign wants people to be talking about and thinking about at this stage. The struggle here is that there is the Trump world that's kind of disciplined, right? That is kind of the Susie and Lassa world. And then there's the Trump world that's quite messy. Everyone listening here knows exactly who we're talking about. Some of the folks, Corey Lewandowski maybe is one of those folks who we're thinking about. The messy one seems to be generating a lot more coverage lately. Remarks from the former president himself are included in that. What does the Trump world want to be heard as their final message, right? And what's your sense on where it's landing without distraction and in the way that they want it to? Is it working anywhere at this point?
Well, they certainly don't want the infighting to be the final message. But, I will say, well, a couple of things on this. Number one, Susie and Chris, they've done a really stellar job throughout this campaign at keeping the drama, at least relatively speaking, for Trump world to a minimum. And that, as we get closer to the election and people are starting to think about the future, obviously is disappearing as the knives are coming out. But I will say, we in Washington are obviously very much obsessed with these sort of internal power struggles. I'm not certain that it resonates with people across the country, especially those sort of low information, low propensity voters who are not sort of up to speed on the daily big news of the day, let alone the infighting in the Trump campaign. And I do think, or I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the Harris folks try to take this and say, look at all the chaos. This is a reminder of the White House you're going to get if you vote for Donald Trump. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they're talking about this to try to give it more life. Look, the closing message the Trump campaign wants is one focused on inflation, the economy, crime, immigration, right? That is, at least publicly what they would say is the closing message they want. But I actually think it's something different, Eugene. I mean, they have been working so hard over the past few months to try to take any sort of negative stigma away from Donald Trump regarding these threats that he could be a dictator. And the way they've been doing this is with all these podcasts we've talked about, having him go out there and sit with somebody who's not a political person at all and talk about his family, talk about, substance abuse, losing his brother, his kids, and his son, where he's going to college, and the fact that he hasn't had a serious girlfriend. It's really, it's stuff like that.
Which is exactly what you want your dad to be doing. He's talking about your non-dating life.
But it makes him look like a normal human, right? They're trying to humanize Trump in this way. That's what they've been trying to sell for the past few weeks. And I think that's, we can continue to see them trying to do that in the final, 10 days, whatever it is.
People have known Donald Trump for ever, right? Longer than we've been alive. He's been in the public light. He's been a political figure since 2015. Do you think there are people out there whose minds can be changed about kind of like how they feel about him, the person, right? The human side of them. How much work does the campaign feel like they can actually do on that front?
So they do think they can make changes on that, which might seem shocking because, like you said, he's been a known quantity for
he's like
100%
name ID.
But they're trying to sort of reframe him from the controversial political figure and return him back to what he was for most of his career, which is like this sort of celebrity, this sort of entertainer. And they're sort of letting Trump sort of lean into that that sort of entertainer, background that he loves so much, to just go out there and have a silly conversation. They think that that draws people in. And I think we are seeing that work with a lot of these young men, and how he's been able to sort of juice his numbers with male voters. And so I do think it's working to an extent. Now, will it be enough to actually help him win the election? I mean, we'll know in less than 2 weeks now.
So if you had to guess, or if you had to pontificate based on all your fabulous reporting you've been doing about the Trump campaign forever, but especially this week, who is happiest and maybe more pissed off as folks are waking up today in the Trump campaign after all this internal back and forth?
Yeah, I would guess that Corey Lewandowski is probably pretty happy. Eugene, this is somebody who has been known for his sharp elbows in Trump world for a long time. He wasn't part of the
Yeah.
campaign, but he was brought in a couple of months ago. And ever since then, we had been hearing about him going around behind the scenes, trying to assert his dominance and sort of take things over. Well, he was sort of pushed back to New Hampshire and sort of sidelined after Susie and Chris made it clear who's in charge, or maybe Trump made it clear who's in charge.
Yeah.
Whoever it was, they made it clear, and they put him in his place, so to speak. And now we are seeing some tough stories about Chris Lasavita. One of them, which we didn't talk about, is actually related to something that Corey Lewandowski did when he was, working for the campaign for these weeks. He wanted an internal audit, Eugene, to find out where a lot of the money was going. And we know right now Donald Trump, he's really lacking when it comes to fundraising. He's been frustrated. He's actually yelled at and scolded donors for not giving to him enough. And Harris has vastly outraised him. And yet you see a story like another one we saw this week, which is Chris Lasavita making $22 million since 2022 on Trump's political operations. Now, Lasavita will say a lot of that money came through his organization and then went out to vendors. Basically, he took the money and paid it to vendors. But regardless, that is not a headline that Chris Lasavita would probably want. And it's probably one Corey Lewandowski is loving right now, because guess what? It's going to get back to Trump, and Trump is pissed about money. So this is not going to make him happy.
No, not at all. And we know what happens when Trump gets pissed. He starts firing people, even at this late stage in the campaign. That wouldn't be that surprising. We will have to leave it there. Miss Rachael, thank you for coming on and hanging out. The VidPod.
Thanks for having me, Eugene. Fun times.
You can find more of this conversation by listening to Playbook Daily Briefing wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Eugene Daniels. Thanks for listening.